Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Today's show is part of our series called The Final Sprint for the Gubernatorial Nominations, which will feature our second round of interviews with those people who really do want to be the next governor in New Hampshire. The first series that we did was titled Race to the State House, and we taped those shows in May. All of them are available to watch on the BCTV website at www.bedfordtv.com. And we did do shows with all five candidates back in May. The two Republicans, Ovid Lamontagne and Kevin Smith, and the three Democrats, Jackie Cilley, Maggie Hassan, and Bill Kennedy. Now, in those shows, we discussed basically the backgrounds of each candidate, and each candidate talked somewhat about their major positions. And as time allowed, I pretty much asked the candidates the same general questions, basically so that viewers would really have a chance to kind of get to know them a little bit and compare them. And I would say to you, take the time to watch the shows, even if you've already seen them. As the primary election is drawing so much closer, it's so important for you to know each candidate and his or her positions on the important issues. This is a big year for New Hampshire. We will have a new governor in January, and you really owe it to yourself to be confident in who you cast that vote for. So please watch the shows. And again, the website is www.bedfordtv.com. Now, today's series is going to be a little different from the first one. First of all, I am not going to waste precious time giving the biographical information again on each candidate, because you can catch all of that on their previous shows. Secondly, while possibly some of the questions may wind up being similar to the candidates, primarily my questions will be relevant to each candidate and to that person's evolving campaign. Third, this series will not include Democratic candidate Maggie Hassan. We simply could not arrive at a date in which she would be able to make it over here to tape a show, so it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Fourth, as mentioned, I will not be doing the biographical information because you can already get that on the other shows, but instead what I'm going to do is to tell you about some of the endorsements that have been received by each candidate, because I think sometimes that helps people to grasp the type of effort that candidates are making, and people can identify with where some of those endorsements are coming from. So today my guest is Democratic candidate Jackie Cilley. And when Jackie served in the New Hampshire House and the New Hampshire Senate, she was really recognized as a very tireless advocate for workers. So it's probably not surprising to know now that her campaign has earned the endorsement of really several important labor unions in the state. The New Hampshire State Employees Association, SEIU Local 1984, the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire, the Police Benevolent Association of New England, the New Hampshire Association of Letter Carriers, the Bricklayers and Allied Craftsmen Local Number 3, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, both Local 490 and Local 2320. And she's also been endorsed by a long list of New Hampshire notables, such as Stonyfield Farms' Gary Hirschberg, former New Hampshire Attorney General Phil McLaughlin, and many, almost countless former colleagues in both the New Hampshire House and the New Hampshire Senate. One particularly important endorsement that I saw that Jackie got was from her husband, Bruce Cilley. And on May 26th, I can't remember if it was an op-ed or a letter to the editor in the Foster's Daily Democrat. And you know what he said? I thought this was so neat. He said, Jackie is, quote, my partner in the foxhole of life, end quote. That is a great endorsement. Jackie, it's so good to have you back.
You caught me. I caught you. I thought you'd go down through the whole list of endorsements. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
That was the most touching endorsement that I received, and the most important in my life.
When I read that, that was, you know how sometimes things just sort of hit you, and I went, oh, nice.
I have to tell you, I am truly blessed, and you know what campaigning is like. I'm sure that you've talked about awful. Exactly,
it's hard work. It's just as bad on the spouse, if not worse.
It is, and there's one tradition we hold on to keep the normalcy in our life.
Yeah.
We get up every morning and we play, we have breakfast together, and we play a game of cribbage.
Great.
That's the way we start every day.
That's nice. That's nice. And you know, one of the other candidates who was here this morning, you know, in chit-chatting before we started, I said, how's it going? And I said, how's your wife holding up through it all? And we got to talking about that because I think sometimes, you know, the campaigns are rough and tough, and they're a lot of work and they're exhausting, and every day is not a great day. Some days you go, oh, you know, they're tough. Yeah. But I think the spouses I think the spouses take it worse because as a candidate, you learn to let it roll off your back and keep going. But the spouse reads a bad letter to the editor or whatever, and like they're heartbroken. So it's tough on a spouse.
You know, and I know you didn't want to go into biographical information. I just want to say this is one thing. I used to do consulting for small businesses that wanted, or small startups they wanted to start up. Yeah. And the very first thing I would ask them always is, where's your family on this? Where's your spouse? Where are your kids? Where's your family on this? Because it is as difficult to start up a business. I mean, you know, we joke about we can work any 18 hours of the day we want. So if the family isn't there, makes it much more difficult. And it's the same thing running for office. I mean, he is my partner. He's been out putting out signs for the last week.
The first time you were here, he was here with you. Yeah,
that's right.
Oh, we had a chance to meet. Yeah, nice guy. But I thought that was great, and I thought people had to hear that. So
thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. My pleasure. Well, now your Republican opponents both believe that lowering business taxes is vital to both helping New Hampshire businesses to prosper and to attracting new business to the state. However, on my last show with you, you stated that taxes are not the first thing that businesses look at. So let's get into that. What do you think are the most important things to business?
I just came from the New Hampshire Canadian Trade Council.
Okay.
And just from a workshop where a fellow who had moved his business down from, I think it was Sherbrooke, it was in Canada, to Littleton. He moved there because he needed a highly educated, trained workforce. And it's still a difficulty for him, especially where we've taken money out of our educational system. He's actually had to go to Vermont for some of the skill needs that he has for his business, which is a shame. He ought to be able to get it right here in New Hampshire. So I don't want to imply that taxes are unimportant to business, but there are a range of things they need first. They need that skilled workforce. They need good roads, good bridges. They need a good communication infrastructure, and they need a safe, healthy environment. And they will all tell you that. That's what he was saying. He moved 200, well, he created 200 jobs here in New Hampshire for that reason. So while the tax level is not unimportant, it is definitely lower down in the consideration set, and every study shows that. They need the infrastructure and they need the workforce.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So on that note, if you cut so far that you can't provide the services businesses need, they don't come, and they're slowing down now. We have a problem on our hands.
Okay. I know you've been a supporter of President Obama's Affordable Care Act. You did indicate you did have support for its provision to expand Medicaid. Now, we are told in New Hampshire that that particular part of it is likely to add 50,000 people to the Medicaid roll, with the cost as high. Don't know if it's exaggerated, but the cost they're saying is $1.76 billion over a 7 to 10 year period. Now, I know that you know also an earlier U.S. Supreme Court decision stated that states can't be forced to expand Medicaid. So given all of that, what do you think needs to happen now in New Hampshire, particularly with regard to the Medicaid?
I think you take a practical approach. And first of all, I come from the perspective that health care is a fundamental human right. I start from that basis. And then I look at what does it take to ensure that all of our citizens have access to quality health care. First of all, I think those figures are a bit exaggerated. I've heard figures of about 27,000 that cannot afford the insurance coverage for health care today. So, and I'm also pretty pragmatic about the way I look at things. I'm looking at what's the best thing for the state of New Hampshire. So you've got about 27,000 people that don't meet the Medicaid eligibility requirements, and they can't afford health care coverage. So when they get ill and they don't go unless they get ill. They get ill and they show up in the emergency rooms. That puts a tremendous pressure on our hospitals. Hospitals who have just been, just received an additional $115 million worth of taxes this past term. As you know, they have a lawsuit against the state.
All right.
So that's what we call uncompensated care. Those are folks that show up in our emergency rooms. They're generally sicker because they can't get continuing care, and that places a burden on the hospitals. Today, the federal government sends $200 to $300 million to help defray the costs of those patients. When the expansion of Medicaid goes into place, that money will go away. So on the one hand, we have the federal government saying we will pay 100% of those costs for the first 3 years and 90% every year thereafter until 2020. That's what they're offering.
Okay.
On the other, they say, well, you don't have to, and the Supreme Court has said we don't have to, but the $200 to $300 million that helps our hospitals to treat people who can't otherwise afford health care coverage is going to go away. That's going to place an even more serious burden on our healthcare system. That seems a little penny wise and pound foolish to me.
Okay.
To say out of hand, we're going to dismiss it. We should be looking at what the best thing. I'm not ideologically driven, and unfortunately, I think some of my colleagues are. We're going to look at what is in the best interest of the people of New Hampshire.
Now, I have to be honest with you, and I've heard that a lot of people are confused, not just me, but I'm certainly not an expert on this. And I'm kind of confused with the new act, how much it makes moot other health insurance issues, that we've had in New Hampshire. And from what I'm understanding, even state governments are kind of like mind-boggled right now, like what they can do and what they can't do and what they have to do and so on. Are there other insurance reforms or whatever in New Hampshire that still need to happen even with this coming in?
Well, there are things that will take place over time, and without having my notes in front of me, here are the things that I know are coming. I mean, first of all, just a couple of weeks ago, health care for women was expanded, so they could get contraceptive care, for example, at the beginning of August. We have young people up to the age of 26 can stay on insurance plans. And there are many provisions that are going into effect. So the lifetime caps will go away, the pre-existing conditions. And some of these have frankly been ridiculous, where at the age of 30 or 40 years old, you come down with a life-threatening disease, and they find out you had acne when you were a teenager, and they use that to say you had it. Exactly. So those are some of the things that that our citizens have dealt with in the past, and they've said that goes away. So, and then there's another provision where insurance companies will have to expend, I think it's 85% of their premiums will have to go into the provision of health care, the actual provision of health care. Many of those things are unfolding as we talk. And then, of course, there are the business incentives. There will be tax credits for small businesses. So there's an awful lot there, and they take place at different times.
Yeah, it will not be just an easy phase-in, obviously. It's going to keep rolling for a long period of time, correct?
Right. It has been a profound change in the way we've delivered health care in this country, and so they have phased it in over time for people to be able to make the adjustments they need to make, the insurance companies to be able to make their adjustments. If you look at Massachusetts, it seems to be working pretty well down there. I mean, this was really, I know folks, folks on the other side of the aisle don't like to acknowledge this. This was based in large part on the model in Massachusetts that Governor Romney put in place.
It's all intriguing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm concentrated on the state.
Yeah.
I frankly don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand sometimes why, when somebody's had a seminal achievement like that, that they wouldn't show the benefits of it, because there have been benefits. And I'm just not a believer that we allow anybody to lead a diminished life or to die because they couldn't afford health care coverage.
True.
Remember where I came from. Your audience can go back to that first tape. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, as you know, New Hampshire right now has a $4.2 billion unfunded liability with regard to public employees' pensions. and legislature has grappled with it, probably while you were in there.
Yes.
And public employees haven't exactly been wild about having changes made to things the way that things have been all along. How do you think this problem is going to be solved?
The issue of the public pension system, was in large part addressed when I was in the State House. And remember, I was the chair of the Executive Departments and Administration Committee. So this really came before my committee. I spent untold hours, days, reading and reading and reading. I went all the way back to the 1970s, 1980s, to the beginning of the pension system. One of the things that became very clear to me is that the New Hampshire retirement system had been used as a political football for way too many times, and certainly any time we saw rough economic times. So back in the early 90s, they put into place a formula that they were told. I read the hearing reports. They were told by actuaries, not a good idea. They did it anyway. So for 16 years, they basically accrued a bill. That bill came due. And so we changed the formula. And what we did with the communities was to make sure that they could pay that back over a long period of time so that it didn't hit, you pay property taxes, I pay property taxes, so that it didn't hit us really hard. 52% of what's being paid for the New Hampshire retirement system is the bill that was not paid. Some years nothing was paid, certainly not what we would have paid if we had paid for Social Security, for example. A lot of folks don't know that our police and firefighters don't get Social Security. This is all they get.
Right, now I know that.
And week in, week out, they've paid 9.75% of their salary toward their pension. Today they pay 11.5%. So we gave the communities 30 years to pay this bill. Some folks will say to me, well, you could fix this if you went to a defined contribution plan. Well, we'd lower the cost for the state. The towns would pay, and you and I would pay. We'd have to pay all of that unfunded liability in 6 years rather than the 30 that we passed
in 6?
In 6 years. So so think about what that will do to our property taxes. I mean, it will spike them right through the roof.
I would not want to think about that.
Right through the roof. And yeah, so again, I go back to, you can be ideologically driven, or you can look at the facts and figures and say, what's in the best interest of the people of New Hampshire? It certainly is not in the best interest of property taxpayers to have to pay a bill in 6 years that they've been given 30 to pay.
Good point.
Yeah, and a lot of the other adjustments, I mean, we tried to go to 25 years at the time that I was in the Senate. That is now in place. And some of the other adjustments that were made, public employees were at the table. They worked with us to try to make sure that those adjustments were made. Some of the things they have done in the last 2 years have actually harmed the system. So they changed the board, for example, and instead of making I think before they changed the board, it was near 20% return on investment, and 60% of what's in that trust fund is from the return on investment. They changed the board. It was, I think, 0.7% the last time I looked. It was really meager.
Yeah.
So not all
difference.
changes have been good changes.
Yeah. Now that's a new take that I've heard here on that.
Well, the reason, I mean, you can legislate well by looking at facts, figures, and data. And I know that's not exciting stuff to talk about in the middle of a campaign and all. I'd much rather talk about, things that are much more understandable, because the pension system is a very complicated affair. But my point about it is, if you really understand it, you are careful in the way you make changes. And I don't think this legislature has been so careful.
So hopefully another legislature will tackle it and put it on the right course.
Yes, I think we need to revisit some of the things that were done that are harming the system right now.
So as governor, you'd be able to kind of bring forth those ideas and issues, correct?
Absolutely. We take another look at it. One of the things that worried me and that concerned me, I was unable to move that ball at the time, but as the governor, that's one of the things that I would want thoroughly reviewed, is the whole concept of double dipping. When somebody ends a job and then they go back into that job, that actually harms the retirement system when enough people do that, because actuaries count on those positions paying into the system. So.
Now, of course, public education, obviously, is always a big issue. And the battle still rages over the Claremont decision. Tell us your thoughts on that. And also, I did read on your website that you did come out against school choice. So I'd like you to talk about that a little bit too.
You're going to have to define that. You mean the voucher system that they have?
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that's what it referred to.
Well, first of all, let me just address the general.
Sure.
As you may recall from our first visit, public education took me out of poverty. It took me out of poverty, and it's done so for thousands of our citizens. And so I'm a staunch advocate of that's a number one priority for me. But it isn't just the morality of it and the fact that for folks like me, it opened up opportunities I never would have had. I'm also a staunch advocate of it because I know it's the bedrock of our economy. It is the absolute bedrock. I told you the story of the company that came down from Canada, Albany International, that moved into Rochester, 400 jobs. And what did they say? The first thing they said was, we came here for a well-educated workforce. I've talked to the folks at GE in Somersworth also that I served when I was in the Senate. They've said the same thing, that an educated workforce is the number one priority for them. So that's the bedrock of our economy. We have to make a commitment to a sound education for our young people. This legislature has not done that. I mean, things like eliminating kindergarten, rolling back dropout ages, those are not commitments to a well-educated citizenry. We have, I told you last time, we've got 5 children.
Yes.
And we've got 12 grandkids. Those children are being educated in a variety of ways. One of my daughter-in-laws homeschools. One of my sons has his son in private school. Another one, and then most of them go to public schools. But they're all being educated in different ways according to what their parents feel is the best. What all of them will agree on, every one of my children, is that we have to have a commitment to education. So the daughter-in-law and son that homeschool still believe that their taxes should go to, to a good public school system and a good Department of Education. So she relies on those resources with the Department of Education to help her to educate my grandchildren. So that's my commitment. In terms of, I think what you might have seen is a reference to having companies be able to give a scholarship to a child and then not pay the tax. I think there's something on the order of a 90% tax credit for giving a scholarship to a child.
And that was something passed this year,
to go to a private school, to go to a religious school, or to be homeschooled. That money's coming out of our general fund, and it's coming out of our educational system. And so those are tax dollars. They are tax dollars. And in my read of the Constitution, and I'm not a lawyer, but my read of the Constitution is that's problematic. It says, that we don't allow tax money to go to religious schools or private schools. That's a public good for the benefit of all of our children. So I object to that, yes.
Okay. I know, I'm watching that clock, so I'm going to ask you one that's a little bit longer maybe for you, and one that probably will be a short one for you, and then give you time to talk. You have not closed the door to expanded gambling in New Hampshire, I know that. What would you insist on for expanded gambling to be palatable?
Absolutely insist that it would have to have the support of the local level, first and foremost.
Okay.
Many areas of the state want nothing to do with it, and they should not have it foisted on them. Any problems that come from gambling are felt at the local level. I don't think any community should be exposed to that doesn't want to be exposed to it. Okay. I think, so you'd have to have a strong support from the local level. You'd have to have very keen oversight of that industry, and there should be a wall between that industry and its ability to buy legislative influence. We don't take any gambling money in this campaign, haven't and won't. So we're listening. This is not something that that I think we need to look at the whole thing. And I think I mentioned there are 40 to 43 states that have expanded gaming. We should learn the lessons of those states before we decide in New Hampshire. And it should not be, by the way, it should not be one company's plan. That, unfortunately, I mean, I sat down and I saw one company's plan, and that's what I'm hearing from some of the candidates in this race, that it is the very plan that I saw outlined. I don't think any one of us should be stumping for somebody's plan.
And, I mean, I think there is some credence to maybe it could bring needed money into the state. But by the same token, I don't think it's the be-all, end-all either.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt at all that it's not going to be the panacea for our whatever budget issues we deal with. At best, the best figures I've seen, $45 to $100 million. That's not chump change.
No.
But that's not the answer to,
No, of course
and
it's
it's not sustainable. Foxwoods is $2 billion in the hole. They can't pay out
I know.
to the right, and Mohegan Sun is restructured. So this is an industry that is well into maturity. I certainly wouldn't dismiss it out of hand, but I think that I think that you do it in a very careful way.
I agree. And answer this as quick as you can so that you can then look at that camera and tell everybody why they need to vote for you in really, literally days now almost. Jackie, your opponent Maggie Hassan supports a tuition freeze for the state's colleges and universities. And I saw that you are strongly opposed, which was not surprising to me because of your background yourself at UNH. I guess I'm kind of confused where she's going with this, and my question is, would this mean an additional burden on taxpayers if tuitions are frozen?
It'll mean an additional burden on our university system. And first of all, a governor cannot make that call. That is not up to the governor of the state of New Hampshire, and I frankly hope that it never is. Our university and college presidents manage their own budgets, and they know best what they're dealing with. So when you think of the fact that we already had the lowest level of state funding for our university system, it was the lowest in the country. 50% was just taken away from them. If all you did was cut or freeze tuition, then you would make the hole that much larger. You don't fix the hole by digging it deeper. And that's exactly what has happened, what is being proposed here. So I would like to see our tuition rates come down. We've got, our students have the highest debt in the country. $32,000, I think, is what our students from the university graduate with. That's unacceptable. We need to make sure that education is available to every student who wants a post-secondary education, but we don't do it by telling the university what they can charge and how to do it.
As usual, the time has just flown, Jackie.
It does. It just goes
you're
really
a wealth
fast.
of information. I guess I'm talking like less than a minute for you to be able to look there and tell people why they need to vote for you on September 11th.
I'm asking for your vote because I am of, by, and for this state. I understand it. I have walked in many of our citizens' shoes, from mill workers to office workers to teachers and a mom and a grandmother and a wife and a property taxpayer. It's something I understand well. I understand how an economy works, and I understand how it doesn't work. And I'm for looking for solutions for our citizens to move our state forward to meet the challenges of the 21st century and to make sure all of our people have good jobs. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. And
Anytime.
I hope we'll be able to have you come back.
Anytime.
All right, great.
Thanks.
Well, again, Jackie did it again 2 times in a row here. She does tell it like it is, and she does a darn good job at it. And that's the kind of thing we love here at the show, tell it like it is. Thanks for watching. Till next time, you keep telling it like it is too. Bye-bye.